With the FM Scout channel being one that focuses a lot on Football Manager tutorials and guides, it's inevitable that we get a lot of questions from you guys about certain aspects of the game and how they work. Now, some of those it's just hard to reply to in a comment form, and at the same time, they're not necessarily worth their own video, so today I've collated some of the most common and interesting Football Manager questions from you guys. I'm going to go through them one by one in this video, giving you answers and insight on it all, and hopefully along the way you'll learn something new, whether you're a new player or an experienced player. I think there's a lot of interesting things to cover in this video. We'll be using my Everton save as the example save for this video, and if you want to check out that rebuild, you can find it on my channel, linked in the description. And just before we get into the first question, if you do get any use out of this video, make sure you smash the like button for us, subscribe for more, and let me know any other questions you might have in the comments, and hopefully I can make a follow-up to this in the future. And the first question that we're looking at is one regarding team cohesion. We were asked how it works, and also how it works in relation to buying new players and bringing new players in. So let's cover that for you as quick and as concise as we can. Team cohesion can be found in the dynamics section, and it's basically the bond that your players have between them. If your team cohesion is better, it will have effects for you on the pitch. As you can see, they're written right here. We've got good team cohesion, and in return, that gives a better mental state for the team. It also sees their positioning improve, as well as their vision and their reactions in game. Basically, because the players know each other better, because they've got a better bond, they're going to know the runs each other are making, know where to position themselves. So having good team cohesion really can help you. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you have bad team cohesion, then you're going to see the negative effects of the things that we've just covered. But how does team cohesion get good? How does it get bad? Well, think about it in real life. We'll use the club I'm wearing here, Chelsea, as an example. They have signed so many players in recent windows that you can imagine it's pretty hard for those guys to gel straight away. It's not like they're going into a fully functioning team and adding one player into that. This is a whole overhaul of the squad, and it's going to take a while for these players to gel. So one of the main factors in team cohesion is time. The longer your players are together for, the better your team cohesion is going to be. On the opposite end of that spectrum, if you buy a load of new players, you'll see your team cohesion will go down, and it will take a while for it to get back up to a good level. There are ways though that you can increase the speed that your team's cohesion will go up, and that is through training. So if you go to the training section and then to your calendar, where you have all your different sessions that your team is doing, say a rest session or match preparation, whatever it might be, you can actually replace these with different sessions, of course, are going to help different things. And one of those things is team cohesion. For example, a rest session has some positive impacts, but will reduce our team cohesion. However, if you were at a pre-season and you've just bought a load of new players and you want to get that team cohesion up, you want to go to extracurricular and choose any of these options. Community outreach will have an impact on your team's team cohesion, as well as team bonding, which has an even bigger impact on team cohesion. So it's particularly important in, say, pre-season, or maybe if you're going for a bad run of results, to add some of these sessions in. It's going to help your team out and get their cohesion up, which in return will help them play better together on the pitch. But how does it work when it comes to scouting players? Well, when you get a report from your staff about a certain player, sometimes you will see either a positive or negative relating to the core groups of your squad. So Evan Ferguson here has a positive that he'll likely be able to fit in to the core group of our squad, which is great. That means when he joins us, there's a good chance he will fit into this core social group that we've got up here. And if you do go onto the social group section, you do get a recommendation of some players that might fit that part of your squad. Now, if a player comes in and slots straight into your social group, your team cohesion in return will rise quicker, because these players are coming in, getting slotted straight in to that main dynamic of the team, which is going to help them. But the crux of it is, if you bring in a load of new players, it's going to lower your team cohesion, and it will just take time before they can really bond together. And once they do, you will see some positive impacts on the pitch. The next question though was an interesting one, because it's one that made me question it myself and actually think about this, about how you might set a team up away from home. Now, me personally, I have a tactic and I stick to it, whether you're home or away. You might get some bad results from that, but my idea is that over time you want to have this philosophy, and whether you're away or at home, you just want to implement that, and the better your team is, the better the result you're going to get. Now, that's one way you can do things. You can just stick to your tactic and your system and play it that way, no matter what. Think about what Postecoglou might do at Spurs, for example, where he just plays his football, whether he's 5-0 up or 5-0 down. Whether it works or not is another question, but you could go that way about it. However, if you are a team that doesn't have a chance to do that and can't risk losing, maybe you're trying to stay up in the league, there are things that you can do to help your team when you're away from home, and this is what I'd suggest anyway. Now, the easiest thing you can do is just have your tactic, and when it comes to a game when you're away from home, or maybe just against really good opposition, you might not be able to be as positive. You might not be the dominating side in that game, so you can very simply just lower your mentality a little bit from, say, positive to balanced. You can see the effects, both negative and positive, of playing in certain mentalities, but say it was a really big game away from home and you just wanted to grind out a point, maybe cautious will be better, and you can see this mentality is best employed for matches where you expect to lose the battle for possession, but you feel you might be able to break. So if you are away from home, that might be the way that you want to go about it. So you could do something as simple as that. There's also the option of completely changing your tactic and having a second tactic available, maybe something that suits being away from home better, whether it's a counter-attacking system or potentially even route one. Then when you have that, you can just switch to that tactic when a big game comes up. But the thing that I would actually suggest myself is a mixture of the first thing that I mentioned in terms of changing your mentality, but also changing just a few instructions and roles of your team. So instead of having a whole new tactic, which might take the players a while to kind of get to grips with over the course of a season, I would suggest just maybe lowering that mentality a little bit, altering some of the roles in your team. So Patterson here is on wing back on the attack duty. I might just ask him to support in this game, whereas Estupinian, I might ask to defend instead of support. So you are just adding a few extra defensive duties in to try and grind out that result and not be so gung-ho in the way that your team is playing. Personally, what I used to do, say I was playing a system like this, some kind of 4-2-3-1 system, this might be how I played when I was at home, but when I was away from home, sometimes I'd take that number 10 out, drop him back, and maybe have someone that's a little deeper lying, so a deep line playmaker in this case. Obviously, if I did that, I'd then change Garner to a different role so we don't have two, and then maybe a slightly more forward-thinking midfielder, say a central midfielder, on the attack duty. That would just give me a bit more cover in front of my defence. Obviously, it would not be Gyökeres in that position, but you get the idea. You don't have to completely overhaul everything you're doing. The general idea is if you are away from home, you might concede more possession, and therefore you might have to be a bit more defensive, and just by lowering some of these roles and duties and your mentality, it really can help you out. So hopefully you're finding this useful so far. I know I certainly was, because these questions actually made me think about FM in a different way as well. So there's two very interesting ones that are a bit more in depth, but now let's run through a few quickfire ones. Now this one is a question I get so often when I'm playing Football Manager, and it's about how you simulate ahead, how you might do in, say, career mode in FIFA or EAFC, whatever you want to call it. Can you do an equivalent in Football Manager where you just jump to a specific point in time? The answer is yes, but you might have some negative effects from it. So to show you how, go to my profile on the home screen and then click go on holiday. So from here you can either simulate ahead X amount of days, you can go on holiday indefinitely, or you can pick a specific date to come back to. Say you wanted to skip pre-season, you could come back on the first game of the season. Whatever you wanted to do, you can select a date and do it that way. Now whilst you are on holiday, you can ask your assistant manager, who will be the one taking over duties whilst you are away, to employ your current match tactics, and even if you select a few players in a team, he'll then play them players when possible if you tick this box here. There's also some instructions about what to do when you receive transfer offers. I usually suggest reject all offers, but do bear in mind, if you do simulate ahead or holiday ahead, whatever you want to call it, the results are still put on you. So if your assistant manager loses some games, it's your fault, and therefore you can get sacked whilst you holiday. I don't really suggest doing this unless you're trying to experiment with a tactic, for example, or just do an experiment in general, like jumping 10 years in the future and then kicking off your save. So just bear that in mind. And also, it will take quite a long while to simulate, depending on how many leagues you have loaded in your database. The smaller amount you have, the quicker you're going to holiday ahead. Next, why does my game look different to yours? Well, I have a skin on my game. You can download skins out there that make your Football Manager game look better or different, depending on how you look at it. There's plenty of options. We've made loads of videos on it, but to do so, once you've downloaded your skin, and there'll be a tutorial out there on how to do so and put it in the right folder, you just go to Football Manager, go to Preferences, and then you can select your skin here. I'm using the Tato skin. A lot of people do ask me which one I am using. It is Tato, and for anyone wondering, there was a question about this, you can update your skin at any time in your save. It doesn't just have to be at the start of a save or anything like that. You can do it whenever and wherever you want. We've also been asked plenty of times before about the pre-game and the in-game editor. How do they differ? How do they work? Well, I'll explain it to you pretty basically now. When you buy Football Manager, you are automatically given the pre-game editor. It's a separate download basically, where you can load up and you can make some edits to the database. It's quite complicated to use. I don't really suggest it, but you can go in there if you want to learn how to use it and, say, give your team more budget when you start a save or anything like that. But the main editor that we get asked about is this pencil icon that you can see up here. This is the FM in-game editor, and you have to pay money for this. I don't know the price nowadays, but I think it's somewhere below £10, between 5 and 10. But basically, you can buy it on the Steam store. That's where I got mine. I'm sure you can get it if you stay on Epic or whatever. But yeah, the in-game editor is something that very easily allows you to change things. So you can make edits to players. So for example, Reece James, I can click on him. I can click start editing. If I want to give him 20 aggression, I can do. Now you can play FM however you want, but I wouldn't really suggest using it for something like this. To me, it just doesn't really seem right. But of course, play the game however you want. At the same time, if Reece James had an injury, you can remove an injury. If you don't go on a player, but you go to a club, say Chelsea here, for example, you can click the icon, edit club details. Then you can do everything from maximizing your club's attendance to go into your finances and giving yourself more money to spend. This is something that can maybe be useful when you're starting a save if you want it to reflect the real life transfer budget of what might have happened since FM24 came out. So that's the difference between the pre-game and the in-game editor. One's free and is a bit more complicated to use. One costs money, but is a lot easier to access. Just bear in mind, when you do start a save, there will be an option that says, allow me to use the in-game editor. If you have bought it, make sure you tick this on or off, depending on if you want to see it or not. And the final thing we're going to cover is a question that we get asked quite a lot regarding attributes and how you really know a player is good for a position based on attributes. Well, I know the easiest thing to do is look at star ratings, and I've made whole videos about star ratings in the past and why you shouldn't trust them, but they do give a general idea of who are the better players and who are the worst players. The higher the star rating, the better that player is for your team. That's not in world football, that's just being compared to players in your side. But yes, in this case, Reece James is clearly a good player and one of our best. But how do you know if a player is good for a specific position? Well, it is very easy to do to judge these attributes because yes, the star ratings give an indication of how good a player is, but how good is he for the role that you want to play in your team? For example, we might decide we want a defensive wing back in our team. How do we know if Reece James is good for that? Well, all you need to do is click wing back on defense, hit that button, and it will then highlight the attributes needed for that role. Now, the ones that are green are the ones that are most important, so marking, tackling, work rate, positioning, and outside of that, the ones that are blue are the ones that will have an effect, so dribbling, passing. They're not as important as the green ones, but they're still important for playing that role. So basically, all you need to do when you're looking at a player for a specific role is have a little look at the attributes highlighted and decide, is Reece James good in those areas? Obviously, it's a rating from 1 to 20. If a player has got 13s, 14s in any of those areas, that's pretty good. They're doing it at a good level, and anything that's dark green, so 16 upwards, they're exceptional for that. So Reece James is a brilliant crosser who's got great work rate, teamwork, positioning, marking. Yes, he might lack a little bit on the passing, but you can forgive that because he's so good at everything else. At the same time, the attributes that aren't highlighted, they're not just to disregard them, they are bonuses on top of what we're seeing. So Reece James is a good wing back on defense, and whilst free kick taking isn't important, he's got good free kicks, he's got good heading as well, he's got decent long shots, and that's just going to add to him being a better player. So to judge a player simply for a role, click where you want them to play. So whether it's midfield, on the Mazzala duty, on the attack, it will then highlight the attributes needed, and you can judge if a player is good for that role or not. And of course, the game does give you a star rating for that position as well to let you know if they think he could be a good player for it. But don't always look at those stars, focus more on the attributes. So hopefully that did make sense. I tried to get through them as quick and as concise as possible, but if you have any questions about these, let me know, or any other questions, drop them down below, and we'll hopefully make a follow-up video answering more of what you guys want to know about Football Manager. Thank you for watching, like the video if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.